Much buzz has been made of late about the tourist, a hypothetical being who misrepresents their credentials, so to speak. See, a tourist in the context of fandom is someone who is not a regular consumer of a particular intellectual property, more a browser. The tourist is ideally characterized as a person who holds incredibly strong and controversial opinions about a piece of media despite knowing very little about it. 9 times out of 10, of course, the tourist label is little more than a thought-terminating cliche, a way of dismissing someone's disagreements without actually having to contend with their arguments. I, a person who has made Star Wars related content online since at least age 13, who owns legal copies of the unedited original trilogy and who spent many of their early years reading obscure extended universe novels, have been called a Star Wars tourist numerous times by people who treat any disagreement about Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi as a declaration of war against themselves, their dog, and baby Luke Skywalker. Yes, tourist discourse is largely nonsense. But I assure you, the fabled tourist does exist, and among his many names are Will, the most interesting thing about me is alcoholism, Jordan, AI slop guy, I don't know this guy's name, but look at him, it's definitely Gary, Bargain Bin, Geeks and Gamers, and I don't know, these guys. Now, as I said before, the tourist label is often applied disingenuously as a means of dismissing any and all disagreement, and it's often incredibly difficult to evaluate what a person has done on their own time, how much time and energy they've dedicated to their love and enjoyment of a property. The unfortunate truth is that people can be lifelong fans of a property and still have the worst takes imaginable on it. Hell, there are Fallout fans that unironically believe that Mr. House is the best way forward for the Mojave. People are just silly sometimes. For that reason, I should make clear that when I call these men tourists, Doctor Who tourists specifically, I am not questioning whether they've watched and enjoyed Doctor Who. It's entirely conceivable that they have watched and enjoyed episodes of the show since the Eisenhower administration. What I am instead claiming is that their hot takes on the series are so nonsensical, so outside the realm of reasonable discourse, that the video we're about to watch may as well be their first ever experience with the franchise, despite heaps of unearned confidence. With all that preamble out of the way, let's take a look at a panel clip posted by resident movie understander, The Critical Drinker.
It is out now. The 14th Doctor is now into his first proper series. It's past the Christmas specials, and we've been treated to some delights of characters. Like, I saw this clip of Maestro.
Who are you? My notation
and
is...
I just...
Why are you... Yes, you heard that correctly. This clip opens with 6, according to my notes, adult men getting fired up and whining about a Doctor Who character looking weird. Jesus fucking Christ. You know, I take it back. None of these men have ever seen this show. They read a Doctor Who Wikipedia synopsis once in 2013, felt confused about these strange new feelings they were having for Matt Smith, and promptly shut the computer. Honestly, this video could end here. I'm sorry. You lose the ability to give your opinions on Doctor Who if you think it's been ruined by a flamboyant costume. And before you say, oh, there must be something else that they're concerned about here, no, this is going to be the entirety of their argument for the majority of this video. Just character look weird. That is the entire thing that this video is built off of. Not even character sound weird, because you've heard all you're gonna hear of Maestro in this video.
We've been treated to some delights of characters.
First, I want to thank you, Drinker. I had managed to avoid watching any clip from this new Doctor Who because of how horrible it looked. Now, thank you for subjecting me to it for the first time.
I won't make you watch the rest of the clip. Partly because the BBC will demonetize me, but also because I don't want to see it. I just thought I'd pop it there.
It's just, what are they doing?
That's it. Done and dusted. Thanks for watching. But of course they keep talking.
This is one of the worst characters I've seen on anything ever. It was insufferable. It is viscerally disgusting listening to this thing prance and dance around screen. The actor was just one of the worst fucking actors I've ever seen. I was shocked at how bad this was. I was shocked.
So this guy, who I'm not going to bother learning anything about because the less record of him there is, the better his future job prospects are, is, put delicately, the only person on this fucking podcast who's actually seen The Devil's Cord, the episode that this screenshot came from, and he is not having a good time. Actually, Gary has also seen it. He just gave some little insight on the actual contents and quality of the episode that I forgot. He repeatedly refers to the character of Maestro as a disgusting thing because apparently he's a cartoon villain, and complains about Jinx Monsoon's performance being apparently abysmal. Put a pin in that because he comes back to it. Let's listen to Gary describe the premise of an episode.
And now they have the Maestro, who is the son of Neil Patrick Harris, who's clearly a dude, and it's supposed to be a replacement for the Master. It's also he's a god. He's godlike, which would have been a great thing for Doctor Who to kind of really get into because it hadn't for a long time in better days. But now it's just used. This thing is clearly activist Russell T Davies. He's trying to get out everything he couldn't get out before. Also he's just a changed man, right? So, but this villain, it controls music. So it feeds on all the unsung songs, which is kind of like the Weeping Angels feeding off of potential energy, you know? So it does something similar, and it removes all the music from the world, and it can like tie you up in musical notes and stuff. It's really gay.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
Dude, I can't with these people. That was the most forced.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
I have heard in my fucking life. These dudes are so desperate for content, so desperate to milk the grift, that they're listening to uneducated synopses of Doctor Who characters and proclaiming them to be worthless. Again, I have to question, have any of these, my notes keep saying adult men, seen even one episode of the BBC's Doctor Who? Here, let's rattle off some Doctor Who synopses. The Doctor sees something weird in a Van Gogh painting and goes back in time to find it's an invisible monster that only Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh can see.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
A bunch of mannequins have come to life in London, and the Doctor has to defeat them by traveling to their base at the London Eye and dumping out a vial of anti-plastic.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
Aliens that turn into ornate stone statues whenever you look at them, but zip around super fast when you're not looking.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
The Doctor accidentally gets shrunken down and materializes on a tiny ship inside of some guy's carnival attraction and has to fight a dinosaur.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
A bunch of aliens take over Earth and turn humans into robo-men with the goal of stealing Earth's core and turning it into a spaceship.
Yeah, sounds retarded.
Guys, for real, I'm starting to think that these guys haven't watched this show. Like, sincerely, how the fuck does a person watch and presumably enjoy Doctor Who and then proclaim it's ruined because it has an unconventional premise? God, this is an embarrassing video. But I actually have to go back to something that I feel like we glossed over a moment ago.
He's a god. He's godlike, which would have been a great thing for Doctor Who to kind of really get into because it hadn't for a long time in better days.
Gary over here, again, I'm assuming that's his name, thinks this is a good idea. He is literally looking at a new Doctor Who concept, saying, "That sounds good. Shame I know it sucks for no specific reason except that the costume looks weird." If I were to guess, based on the contents of this video, who was the biggest Doctor Who fan, I'd have to assume that it's Gary, not just because he seems to sort of understand what makes a Doctor Who concept interesting, but because he ties it back to previous works and makes a comparison that I probably wouldn't have instantly made. Although, come to think of it, he probably just read that somewhere. And yet, even as he clearly has something, however vapid, to say, he has to tie it back to the grift. The idea is ruined, I shit you not, because the character looks weird. It's a good idea, but it looks gay, so it must be a bad idea. In Doctor Who. Also, as a side note, I have no idea what he's talking about when he says that the Master is being replaced. The third special pretty heavily teased the Master returning at some point. If there's some behind-the-scenes material or some interview that I'm unaware of, someone should probably let me know about that, because otherwise this just feels like a pointless dig, like, they're replacing your favorite character, when in fact they aren't. These guys waffle a bit about how they-them pronouns are disturbing.
The most disturbing shit,
quite retarded.
Like the most disturbing shit about like this clip here, the introduction, is when the guy says get away from him and he corrects it and says, no, it's them. I'm a them, like correcting the pronouns.
And then fearmonger over a child referring to their creator as daddy because they're grifter creeps.
And then the little kid saying, they're my daddy or whatever the fuck. It's just disturbing and weird.
These guys don't give a shit about Doctor Who, or sci-fi, or good media. They're just generally low-quality people who have found a way to monetize the fact that they don't actually watch the media they talk about. But let's let them keep going anyway.
I was reading an interview with him just before doing this open bar, and it was along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, but and I quote it more or less verbatim, though, Doctor Who's queerness is now front and center, and I'm not going to apologize for that. That was essentially his take on this.
Well, he's right.
Yeah, I mean, well, when I see characters like this, it seems pretty irrefutable.
Yes, it's irrefutable that Doctor Who is super queer because a single screen grab from one episode. Of course, I don't have a problem one way or another with how many queer characters there are in Doctor Who, and there do seem to be a few more on average these days, but I just love the idea of going through life thinking that singular frames of a TV show are enough to judge its overarching themes.
Yeah, he talks a lot about how he did It's a Sin and how he did Queer as Folk, and he's very proud of those shows, and now he's bringing that same energy to Doctor Who because he couldn't do it before. And I thought, that's such a strange attitude to have, because it's no longer like the 1990s when like the idea of having gay characters or trans characters on screen is some revolutionary piece of creative rebellion. It's everywhere now. It's commonplace, and so you're not really reshaping anything, and you're not really taking some like bold stand.
My brother in Christ, you gathered 5 other guys to cry about it on YouTube. Your entire job is complaining about gay characters and trans characters and women, and you rake in millions of views. You cannot pull the whole "this isn't revolutionary, everyone's fine with it" shtick when you're on a podcast of multiple micro-celebrities who are very much not fine with it. Yeah, the gays are everywhere, assuming everywhere means popping up in a bunch of franchises every now and then. And that fact will continue to be revolutionary as long as getting triggered by it remains a viable business practice. Stop letting queer people in movies hurt your feelings, tell your audience to do the same, and watch as the supposed problem works itself out.
His whole attitude to this seems to be like that one aspect of having gay representation on screen means a lot to him. And, you know, he's a gay man himself, and I guess he's lived through a lot of stuff where in previous decades he couldn't be honest about who he was, or he couldn't come out with it and stuff. And that comes out in his work now. But it's not necessarily what you need to work into a sci-fi show that's just there to entertain general audiences. Yeah. Like, it can be a thing that you address, and that's why you did shows like It's a Sin and Queer as Folk. Great. But you don't have to necessarily work it into everything, because it's not going to function properly in everything.
God, every time that I listen to this guy, I think that I found my new favorite clip of him. This arguably functioning alcoholic just said with his whole chest that queerness doesn't function in a sci-fi show. Sorry, a sci-fi show that's just meant to entertain general audiences. The queer characters in recent Doctor Who episodes, where recent refers to anything post-Whittaker because I have not watched her era, I don't want to, and you can't make me, though you won't see me desperately clawing for money talking about a series I haven't even watched. Sorry, where were we? Right, the queer characters have just been, like, normal? There were a couple cringy lines of dialogue here and there, but for fuck's sake, this show has been doing sci-fi settings just fine, gay people and all. There's also the fact that Doctor Who has done political allegories since the very beginning, something you'd know, I don't know, if you watched it. Like, damn, man, a series that's covered criminal justice abuse, genocide, suicide, racism, with a main character who spent a significant amount of time working for the United Nations, an episode in which a character gleefully goes back in time to kill Hitler, would be going just a bridge too far if it addressed homophobia. Say it with me. This man is a tourist. But it's worse than that. He didn't just say that the queerness doesn't function in Doctor Who, he said it doesn't make sense in sci-fi altogether, presumably because he's the most boring man alive, but it may also be because he's not very bright, or perhaps because his paycheck depends on him being obviously wrong about things for an audience who shits their pants at the slightest hint of disagreement. Your guess is as good as mine. Also, I cut that clip off early before.
But you don't have to necessarily work it into everything, because it's not going to function properly in everything.
And especially a show that is supposed to be kid-friendly. All right?
Family-friendly.
Family-friendly.
Like,
that's why
families
they
can
specifically
sit down together and watch this, and they really can't. Like, this is... It's disgusting, this particular character. There's a lot of trans stuff. There's the pronouns.
I'm Shadiversity, and I think my show about a guy who's sexually attracted to his spaceship would be going too far if it added gay people. Now, this next bit, the bit that we're going to close on, is beyond anything else disgusting. It's a group of guys with negative talent saying gross things about a trans woman who did nothing to them, whose only crime is wearing a funky costume in a TV show. They're gonna call this random human being some really nasty things, all while celebrated trans ally Mahler, I don't know, takes a shit or something. It's weird that he has nothing to say on this topic. And I understand if you don't want to hear that, but I aim to create something positive out of this whole endeavor. Let's just take a minute to laugh at some of the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life.
I have a quick question here. So Ryan, you saw episode 3, right?
I haven't seen episode 3, no.
Who's seen episode 3?
Which one's that?
The one with that weird creature with the orange hair.
Yeah,
I've seen reviews of it.
I've seen all the clips of her in it.
Oh, okay.
Or,
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it.
You've seen it, Nerdrotic. Like, because I was looking at that performance of Maestro, and not only am I watching an appalling actor, like Ryan might be right, like this person could be mentally ill. Like that is how bad the performance is. It's the guy can't get through a single line of dialogue without screaming and shouting and being flamboyant and massively overacting everything. It's just an abysmal performance.
Dude, imagine being so much of a tourist that you don't even know what acting is. This motherfucker thinks that Jinx Monsoon's performance is so over the top that she's mentally ill. With some of these guys, I generally assume that they're liars based on how comically wrong they are day in and day out. But with this man, I choose to believe that he is just that dumb. That he calls a mental health hotline every time he watches the Raimi Spider-Man movies. He's just really concerned about that Defoe guy. There is also, of course, the fact that he's apparently not smart enough to realize this character was intentionally overacted. I get pushback sometimes when I say a choice people dislike is intentional, because a lot of chud-type people, to them it sounds like I'm saying you can't criticize this bad thing because it's bad on purpose. So allow me to clarify. This character is, in universe, putting on a performance. They're overacting because they're an ancient god who treats all of existence as theater. The absolute worst moments of Monsoon's performance in this episode are the times when she tones it down. It is a quite good performance, and this guy is just not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Russell T Davies went out of his way to cast this freak. Like, that's what it was. Like, Russell T Davies went to it, they knew each other, but they went to a show or something where this thing was performing as a drag queen. And like, I think they started off as a drag queen. Now they're trans. I think that's what's going on. So obviously they are mentally ill. But Russell T Davies went out of the way to cast this. I think you'd be perfect for Maestro. This idea I have for Doctor Who. Well, so it was very, very intentional.
And this is where our journey comes to an end. Not just because it's hilarious to listen to a guy who has the easiest job in the world and he's still terrible at it purport to understand mental health, but also as a reminder that despite it all, the lies, the bigotry they pretend to try to hide, there's something special going on here. The Devil's Chord wasn't the absolute best of Doctor Who, but it was made with intention. RTD was in some way inspired by a performer and played to her strengths to tell a story that is not only quite good, in my humble opinion, but unique, creative, and the very reason that we create art in the first place. These men are tourists in every sense of the word, not just because they understand very little about the things they talk about, but because they're not going to stay long. They will dip into Doctor Who every couple of months to eke out whatever money they can, but then they'll leave. If this series' writing continues to improve as it seems to be doing, these brief dips into the pond will become increasingly infrequent as the hate dollars dry up. And you can take solace in the fact that they know this as well as you do. The success and quality of these shows spells their failure. And isn't that nice? I really can't write video closers. Thanks for watching. You should subscribe and such.